Hello and welcome to Shaking and Sipping. This is the show where we shake or stir a cocktail or other mixed drink, talk a bit about its history, take a sip, and find out how it is. We're continuing on our quest to work through the IBA's official list of classic cocktails to see how those stack up. We are in the Unforgettable section, and this week's Unforgettable is the Stinger. Now this is one that we don't have a terribly precise history for. It's a drink that for a while was generally thought to be a post-Prohibition drink, or often suggested as a during Prohibition drink as a way of masking the flavor of lower quality based spirits. However, we know that it goes back further than that because it is in The Ideal Bartender. That's the 1917 Bullock book that we've mentioned previously. He has it in there in slightly different proportions, but otherwise same exact drink, and is called a Stinger. We also can see drinks earlier than this, going all the way back to at least 1891 by someone called William the Only William Schmidt. I have no idea the history of that nickname, but he has a drink that's called the Judge, but is the same ingredients. And there's several other drinks with similar ingredients in the 1890s, as well as a drink actually called the Stinger, which uses a different base spirit, quite a different base spirit. It uses Amère-Piquant, which is a sort of weird French Amaro that doesn't really exist anymore. There's still something by that name, but it's a very different spirit. But anyway, this is not about that. The moral of the story is this drink goes back quite a ways. We have several writings after Prohibition that cite this as one of the more common drinks in the time leading right up to Prohibition. We also know this was one of the favorite drinks of the Vanderbilt family, and that apparently that is part of the reason why this drink moved from an after-dinner drink, like a pousse café, to being a true sort of cocktail drink that could be a before dinner or indeed any time of day sort of drink. That also is where we believe the idea of shaking the drink may have become common, as early recipes show it as a stirred drink, as would make sense according to modern practice as well. That's all the history we have on this one. We're going to do 3 variants today. We're going to do one following the IBA spec, of course. We're going to do one following a more modern spec, which is a little bit drier, and then we're going to do a total variant. So let's get set up and make the first drink. So for the IBA spec of the drink, we're going to start off with one of our 2 ingredients because this is a very simple duo cocktail. We're going to start with some white creme de menthe. There are some recipes that call for green, but none of the early ones do, and I generally only keep white around for various reasons. We want 20 milliliters, that is right about 2/3 of an ounce, of our white creme de menthe. And then of cognac, we have our Pierrefonds 1840 as usual. We want 50 milliliters. So that is about 1 2/3 ounces. And this is our ratio here, 5-2. That's going to be a bit drier than the version we have in Bullock. In the Bullock version, it's written as a jigger to a pony. Now, these things aren't always exactly locked. There were different definitions of these things available at the time. I tend to use the measure that a jigger is about 1.5 ounces or 45 milliliters, while a pony is about 1 ounce or 30 milliliters. So that one's a 3-2 versus this being a 5-2. With that, let's give this a little stir. And then we're going to strain that off into an ideally chilled Nick and Nora. IBA calls for a small martini glass. I tend to use a Nick and Nora for that sort of application. And this has an optional garnish of a mint leaf. Perfectly fine to do. I'm not going to, and in the IBA's picture it is the smallest mint leaf on the side. You could do that if you want, but I don't find it completely necessary. Let's try an IBA spec Stinger. So that's a good drink. It's a little bit sweet. The creme de menthe has enough sweetness in it that really takes the edge off of the cognac. So you get a bit of sweetness right at the front. You get the mint, which really washes over your tongue. But then the cognac shows up almost higher in the mouth. It almost fills up the mouth with cognac. Yeah, there's a slight bit of cognac right at the beginning with the sweetness. There's something with like the wood, the vanilla or something in the wood and the sweetness that does hit right at the front. But then it's mint, and then big, whiskey cognac notes sort of filling the mouth, which linger, but also the mint lingers on sort of the back of your tongue. It's a really nice drink. All right, for variant number 2, we are going to make it the way that David Wondrich does, which he has this at a 3-to-1 ratio. I'm going to slightly scale the drink down just because I'm making 3 drinks right now and I don't need it as large as he has it, as he has it as 2¼ ounces to 3/4 of an ounce. So that's a 3-to-1 ratio, but that's a rather large drink. He makes it shaken, as like I said, was a trend possibly started by the Vanderbilts, but certainly was a common trend that even though the IBA still calls for it to be stirred, most places you see the drink, you will see it called for as a shaken drink. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to use same ingredients, my Driode white creme de menthe. I'm going to do 1/2 ounce. 15 milliliters. And then I'm going to do 1½ ounces, or 45 milliliters, of our cognac. And again, that's as simple as it gets. Let me grab some ice, we'll give it a shake. And then we're going to strain that off into another ideally chilled Nick and Nora glass. So I think this will be an interesting test because, of course, we're increasing the proportion of cognac to the mint, but we are also increasing dilution by doing shaken rather than stirred. We also end up with a much cloudier, less translucent drink. If we can see those for comparison. So this is a Wondrich spec of the Stinger, just with slightly reduced volume. The nose is interesting on this. It's the same on both of them, or very similar. It doesn't really smell like mint or cognac. It's sort of all melding, and I'm not sure what that note is that's really coming off. Ooh, so that's interesting. So there's no longer a sweet hit at the front of the drink. There is sweetness in the drink, but it shows up much later in the palate now. The sweetness is now just at the front of the drink, just taking the edge off of the spirit, which does make some amount of sense that this drink was said to be made during Prohibition as a way to mask inferior or homemade-based spirits. This would certainly do that. But then more of the cognac shows up, and then the sweetness shows up later, integrated with the mint part, and that hits sort of in the center of your tongue, but after the cognac has already gone past. Let me try it once more. Yeah, there's a lingering cognac thing, but then also the mint just sort of shows up in the middle of it, mid-palate. It's really cool. I like this drink quite a bit. I think I would hazard to say I prefer this over the IBA spec, but nothing against the IBA spec. All right, we are back to make the final drink, and this one is one I really love. One thing I didn't mention on the Stinger is that while cognac, or brandy, is definitely the traditional spirit and is by a wide margin the most commonly used, you can use other spirits here. So David Wondrich enjoys a quality white rum in his, and many folks enjoy one made with bourbon, as do I. The great Audrey Saunders, a while ago, 15 plus years ago now, came up with a variant on the Stinger called the Goodnight Irene. I discovered it because Paul Clark wrote about it on his fantastic cocktail blog, and the idea of the Goodnight Irene is that it is a bourbon Stinger, specifically Maker's Mark. You could use something else, but you want something that is wheated and has that really soft character that Maker's Mark has. and then replacing the creme de menthe with a larger proportion, but with Branca Menta, which I don't believe we've seen on the channel yet. If you recall, in a previous episode, we did have Fernet Branca, which is a very famous, important spirit. Branca Menta is a similar concoction, but dials back the eucalyptus and replaces it with menthol. And it's a really cool product. So let's go ahead and mix this one up. All right, this one is fun because it's an equal partser. So this is 1.5 ounces of Branca Menta. That's 45 milliliters. And 45 milliliters, or 1.5 ounces, of Maker's Mark. Or again, you could use another bourbon, but I would use something wheated, and I would use something that is in the sort of 80 to 90 proof range. I wouldn't go with something, barrel strength or cask strength here. I think it would just be too much going on. I'm gonna grab some ice. We'll give it a shake. Now, while both of the others and the original version were served up, this drink was commonly served, especially mid-century, as a drink on either rocks or cracked ice or shaved ice or that sort of thing. So I just broke up a cube there. I'm also going to do a partially gated pour here. I don't know if I broke up any of the ice enough to come out, but if there's any, there's some nice little pieces in there. So we'll let those strain out without getting any cubes. Great. That's the first gated pour we've ever done on this channel. That's a thing. All right, this is the Goodnight Irene. Oh, so here the menthol is just huge on the nose because Branca Menta is not fooling around. So good. I don't even know what all I'm tasting. There's just so much happening. The very front of the palate is slightly sweet, but in a, not a sugar way, in a darker molassesy way. Gives way into some of the bourbon notes. I get that soft Maker's Mark happening. Then a bunch of menthol, a little bit of eucalyptus, that sort of thing happening all the way into my throat. Feel almost a little bit of tingling throughout my mouth from the menthol, and also the peppermint is helping with that too. It's just such a good drink. It's rich, it's complex. There's so many flavors happening here, but without being incredibly bitter or incredibly spirit forward or it's not incredibly anything. It's just all things, and they happen step by step, and they're hard to chart. So good. The Goodnight Irene. Highly recommended. Well, thanks so much for coming along with me this week on our Stinger adventure. I hope that you will try some sort of a Stinger yourself this week. Let me know in the comments how you feel about it. And on that note, please do all the YouTube things that I'm required to ask for. Likes, shares, subscribes, comments, watch all my previous videos, etc. You can follow the blog. It's shakingandsipping.com. We have a write-up on the drink each week, as well as most weeks the day after the drink video goes up, we'll have a post about IBA in real life where we order the drink in a local Seattle cocktail bar, see how they make it, if they make it often, etc. You can find out when we're doing those for sure by following on Twitter at shaking_sipping for those type of updates. And we'll be back next week with the next drink on the IBA's list. Until then, happy sipping. Cheers.